Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking another deep dive into potential USC defensive coordinator candidates that they should be pursuing this offseason. Talked a little last week about a few candidates. Manny Diaz, the defensive coordinator at Penn State, Jim Leonard, the former defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, Tony White, defensive coordinator at Nebraska, and Dan Lynn, the defensive coordinator at UCLA. Want to talk about a few more candidates that I think USC should be pursuing this offseason. Before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about how big of a hire this is for USC. And I know USC fans might know this, but I don't know if college football fans recognize how impactful this hire could be, not only for USC as they move into the Big Ten, but in terms of impacting the college football landscape. I mean, I'd go as far as arguing that this defensive coordinator hire for USC is more impactful to college football than who they hire at Mississippi State as their head coach. And that being why you might ask, Lincoln Riley is always going to have great quarterback play and a great offense at USC. And you look at if this USC team can get this defensive coordinator hire right and get a guy in there that's going to fix up this defense, and this is a USC program that's not only going to be competing for Big Ten titles, but national titles for a long, long time. A massive hire for USC that they should spare no expense in making. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support that the USC fans have shown the boys, it's been amazing. You guys know how much I love talking about this program through the highs, through the lows. You guys have been always rocking with us. Can't thank you guys enough. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, we're going to do another one next week. Drop your candidates that you would like to see at USC as the new defensive coordinator. We'll add them to the list. We'll be talking about a bunch of candidates for the next few weeks. Without further ado, let's get into this. I even busted out the PowerPoint for this. This is how big of a deal I think this USC defensive coordinator hire is. Haven't used PowerPoint since high school, but we're going to use it now. The first guy I want to talk about, and arguably my favorite candidate outside of maybe Manny Diaz, Dave Aranda, the current head coach at Baylor. It sounds like his time might be running out. And if Dave Aranda becomes available as a defensive coordinator, I think he should be one of the first phone calls Lincoln Riley and this USC program make. You look at Dave Aranda's track record as a defensive coach, even as a head coach. I mean, this is a guy that's won a Big 12 title as a head coach at Baylor. That is extremely hard to do. But you look at his track record as a defensive coordinator, winning at the highest level. 2019 national champ for the LSU Tigers. And that LSU team gets a lot of talk about how good the offense was with guys like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. You look at the dudes they had on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of those guys are playing in the NFL. Dave Aranda checks pretty much every single box you want as a USC defensive coordinator. Elite track record of grabbing talent at the high school ranks. You take a look at some of the guys he brought into Baton Rouge, top 100, top 5-star national ranked guys. But more importantly, and I think the most important aspect of this defensive coordinator hire is elite defensive scheme and elite player development. You look at Dave Aranda coach defenses, they don't blow coverages. They don't have bad run fits. That's been plaguing USC for the last couple of years. But more importantly, he's developing this talent. USC is always going to be able to attract top talent, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball, whether it's on the defensive side of the ball. But what you have to do is develop that talent into All-American, All-Conference, NFL caliber guys. That's where Alex Grinch and this USC defensive coaching staff has fallen short. This USC defense this year was not a problem because of the lack of talent. And you take a look at that defense, former All-Big 12 linebacker Mason Cobb, Damani Jackson was a 5-star coming out, ton of guys with a ton of potential, and they never really got developed. And what's going to get cleaned up when Dave Aranda, or if Dave Aranda becomes the defensive coordinator at USC's, that talent is going to get maximized. And two, the biggest problem that you saw for USC is that the defensive scheme just wasn't it, right? Bad run fits, blown coverages, that stuff does not happen with Dave Aranda. He has an elite track record at LSU and Wisconsin. And so you're getting a guy that has proven to be one of the best defensive-minded coaches in all of college football. And even better, he's from California, so he has a little experience recruiting the hometown state as well. And again, a very good recruiter at LSU. Dave Aranda, we talk about the boxes you want to check: talent evals, talent development, defensive scheme. I mean, he's checking all of those boxes as USC's defensive coordinator. The next guy I want to talk about, Zach Arnett, just fired as Mississippi State's head coach, but what you can maybe be critical of his head coaching career, only 1 year where, I mean, you look at Zach Arnett was hired or elevated as defensive coordinator to head coach after the passing of Mike Leach. He pretty clearly wasn't ready. I mean, 37 years old as a head coach of an SEC program, wasn't necessarily ready for that spotlight. As a defensive coordinator, I mean, he's been absolutely elite. And what I love most about Zach Arnett is he's done more with less at both of his stops. You look back at his time at San Diego State, they had top 5 defenses during his time at San Diego State. That's why he was one of the hottest commodities as a defensive coordinator at the Power 5 level a couple of years ago. He goes to Mississippi State, and in a program in the SEC where it is really hard to get top talent, he didn't necessarily have the top talent, but the defense played their tails off. And so doing more with less, the player development aspect side of things has been really good for Zach Arnett. And so you think what it would look like at USC when he's able to get a little bit more talent into that defense. I think you're looking at a really good defense under Zach Arnett, mixes up the schemes beautifully well. And again, he's an aggressive defensive coordinator, but it's calculated aggression. I mean, Alex Grinch sometimes is blindly aggressive and just giving up the big plays. Zach Arnett does a really nice job balancing that aggression, and he's a really good schemer because he has to be a good schemer because he doesn't have the talent on the defensive side of the ball like the Georgia Bulldogs, so he has to scheme up guys up and kind of scheme a defense. And he's been very, very good at that at both stops, San Diego State and Mississippi State. Again, the background in California at San Diego State, I think, is important. And so Zach Arnett, although not a great head coach at Mississippi State, I think he'll be a better head coach in the future, would be a really nice hire for USC as the defensive coordinator. The last guy I want to talk about, and if possible, one of my favorite potential hires, and that's Phil Parker at the defensive coordinator at Iowa. Now, the tricky part with Phil Parker, and I know he's a popular name in terms of USC fans, is getting him out of Iowa City. He's been there since 1999, but the track record of what he's done in Iowa City is probably one of the most impressive defensive coordinator resumes that you'll see across the country. And this is not the first time Phil Parker's name has been entered into the defensive coordinator coaching carousel. You'll probably have to pay him a lot of money to get him out of Iowa City. I think every penny of that would be worth it. You look at Phil Parker and what he's done at Iowa. Opposite an offense that has been one of the worst, not only in the Big Ten and the Power 5, but in the FBS for the last couple of years. They're consistently winning 8, 9, 10 games because Phil Parker's defense has been top 10 in almost every single defensive metric you want to look at for the last 5 years. I mean, he has one of the best track records as a defensive coordinator, and very similar to Zach Arnett, elite player development, right? Yeah, Iowa's not a place where you're getting in 4 and 5 stars consistently. But what he's doing is, one, really, really good evaluating talent and knowing what guys to go after on the trail. But more importantly, getting those guys in and developing them. I mean, they consistently put out dudes to the NFL and they just continue to reload. Last year, they had 4 or 5 draft picks. One, Jack Campbell, the linebacker, going in the first round. You say, they're losing a lot of talent on the defense. Can they be good the next year? What does he do? He just reloads with guys that are just getting developed at such a high level in Iowa City. And it's really fun to think about if you can get Phil Parker to come to USC and bring that top 10 caliber defense out to USC, and you pair that up with an offense that is going to be as good as it's going to be in USC for the next couple of years under Lincoln Riley, that's what you're looking at as a top powerhouse national championship contender for this USC program. Phil Parker would be an elite hire. I wouldn't be surprised if USC calls him. Now, again, the biggest problem, getting him to go from Iowa City to USC. He's been in Iowa City since 1999. But if Phil Parker is willing to take this job, I think would be another absolutely dynamite hire for USC. Those are the 3 names I wanted to talk about today: Dave Aranda, Zach Arnett, Phil Parker. A couple names that we're still doing some research on and going to be talking about next week. Again, let me know in the comments section what guys you would recommend to be hired at USC. Appreciate all the support from the USC fans. Again, you guys always show a ton of love. Can't thank you guys enough. We'll talk to y'all later.